Let's get one thing out of the way immediately. This video is not going to tell you to wake up at 4 a.m. It's not going to suggest you replace your social life with a vision board. Nobody here is going to recommend that you drink celery juice, manifest a Lamborghini, or treat hustle culture as a personality trait. There will be no footage of a rented Ferrari. There will be no thumbnails of someone pointing at a stack of cash with an expression of theatrical disbelief. And there will be absolutely, categorically zero mention of dropshipping as a path to generational wealth. What this video is going to do is something considerably more useful and considerably less glamorous. It's going to tell you the actual truth about how people build wealth from nothing, not the highlight reel, not the survivorship bias version where one person's extraordinary outcome gets packaged as a repeatable formula. The real version, the one with math in it and timelines that don't fit in a TikTok, and strategies that work for ordinary people with ordinary starting points and ordinary incomes and the genuine desire to end up somewhere dramatically different from where they started. Here's the thing about becoming rich from nothing that the financial entertainment industry doesn't want you to know. It's boring. The actual process of building significant wealth over the course of a career and a lifetime is, mechanically speaking, one of the least exciting things you could describe. It involves some fairly basic math, a small number of key decisions made well, a lot of patience, and the consistent avoidance of a specific set of mistakes that derail most people. That's essentially the whole thing. There is no secret. There is no trick. There is no one weird tip your financial advisor doesn't want you to know. What there is this: a system, a set of principles and behaviors and decisions that, applied consistently over time, produce outcomes that look extraordinary from the outside, but are entirely predictable from the inside. The people who build wealth from nothing aren't special. They're not geniuses. They don't have access to information the rest of us don't. They just understand the system, the actual system, not the Instagram version, and they work it without getting distracted by the noise. This video is going to teach you that system, all of it, in plain language, without the fluff. We're going to cover how wealth actually works mathematically, what makes it accumulate and what makes it stall. We're going to cover income, how to build it, how to grow it, and why your income alone is not the determining factor in your financial outcome. We're going to cover spending, not the cut your coffee version, but the structural decisions that actually move the needle. We're going to cover investing, in enough depth to be actually useful, not so much depth that your eyes glaze over. We're going to cover the psychological side of money, which is where most people actually fail, and we're going to cover the advanced moves, the specific strategies that separate people who build real wealth from people who earn good incomes and somehow end up with nothing to show for it. No BS, no shortcuts, no borrowed Ferraris. Let's go. Chapter 1. What rich actually means, and why your definition is probably wrong. Before we talk about how to become rich, we need to spend a few minutes on what rich actually means, because if you're working toward the wrong definition, you can spend decades in the pursuit of something that doesn't actually produce the outcome you want, and that's a genuinely terrible way to spend a life. The cultural definition of rich is almost entirely visual. It's the house, the cars, the vacations, the clothes, the restaurants, the watch, the zip code. It's consumption. It's what you can see from the outside. And this visual definition is what most people are operating on when they say they want to be rich. They want the lifestyle that in movies and music videos and social media gets presented as the external signature of financial success. Here's the problem with the visual definition. It's economically backwards. The people who most visibly display the signals of wealth are frequently not the wealthiest people. They're often people who are spending at or beyond their means to project an image. And the genuinely wealthy people, the ones with real, durable, life-changing financial security, frequently look nothing like the cultural archetype. They drive reasonable cars. They live in houses that are nice but not ostentatious. They don't announce themselves. They're invisible, which is a large part of why the cultural image of wealth is so distorted. The genuinely wealthy don't perform wealth, so they don't show up in the visual feed. The Morgan Housel book, The Psychology of Money, has a line that deserves to be carved into every financial decision you ever make. Wealth is what you don't see. The car someone drives tells you what they spent. It tells you nothing about what they have. The person driving a $90,000 SUV may have less net worth than the person driving a 10-year-old Honda. The spending is visible. The savings, the investments, the financial resilience, these are invisible from the outside. The working definition that actually matters. For the purposes of this video, and frankly for the purposes of your actual financial life, here is the definition of rich that we're working toward. Having enough invested assets to generate income that covers your expenses permanently without requiring you to trade your time for money. This is sometimes called financial independence. Sometimes it's called passive income, though that phrase has been so thoroughly colonized by get-rich-quick marketing that it's nearly useless. The concept underneath the phrase is simple. You have enough money working for you that money is no longer the reason you do what you do with your time. This definition has some interesting implications. It's not a fixed number, it's a ratio, the relationship between your assets and your expenses. Someone with very low expenses can achieve financial independence with a modest portfolio. Someone with very high expenses needs a much larger one. This means that your spending behavior is not just a savings variable, it's a goal-setting variable. Every dollar you permanently remove from your monthly expenses reduces the total wealth you need to accumulate to be free. It also means that financial independence is achievable at a much wider range of income levels than people assume. It's slower at lower incomes and faster at higher ones, but the path is the same regardless of starting point, and the timeline, which can range from 10 years for someone with a high income and low expenses to 30 years for someone with a moderate income and moderate expenses, and is almost always shorter than people who haven't run the math think it is. The number. Here's how to calculate your financial independence number, the amount you need to have invested to be considered by any reasonable definition rich. The foundational research comes from what's called the Trinity Study, which analyzed historical investment returns and withdrawal rates and concluded that a portfolio invested in a mix of stocks and bonds can sustain a withdrawal rate of approximately 4% per year indefinitely, meaning you can take out 4% of the portfolio value each year, adjusted for inflation, and the portfolio will last 30+ years with high historical reliability. The 4% rule, as it's commonly called, gives you a simple formula. Multiply your annual expenses by 25. The result is your financial independence number, the portfolio size at which you can cover your expenses from investment returns without depleting the principal. Annual expenses of $30,000. Financial independence number is $750,000. Annual expenses of $50,000. Financial independence number is $1,250,000. Annual expenses of $80,000. Financial independence number is $2 million. Annual expenses of $100,000. Financial independence number is $2,500,000. These numbers are large. They're not unachievable, but they're large, which is why the relationship between your expenses and your goal is so important. Reducing your annual expenses from $80,000 to $60,000 doesn't just save you $20,000 per year, it reduces your financial independence number by $500,000. Both effects simultaneously, you're accumulating faster and you need less. The leverage is enormous. This calculation is the first honest thing most people do with their financial goals, and it's clarifying in ways that vague aspiration toward being rich someday never is. You now have a number, a real, specific, mathematically grounded number, and having a number transforms becoming rich from an aspiration into a project. A project with milestones, a timeline, and progress you can measure. The timeline reality check. The reason people underestimate their ability to build wealth from nothing is usually that they're thinking in linear terms about a process that's geometric. They think, I save $500 a month, that's $6,000 a year. At that rate, it'll take forever to reach $750,000, and in pure contribution terms, they're right. It would take 125 years. But that's not how it works. With investment returns compounding over time, $500 per month invested at a 7% average annual return, a historically conservative estimate for a diversified stock portfolio, reaches $750,000 in approximately 36 years, not 125, 36. And that assumes no income growth, no savings rate increases. nothing but the same $500 per month for 36 years. With income growth and savings increases over time, the timeline compresses significantly. Increase the monthly contribution to $1,000 and the timeline drops to around 27 years, to $2,000 per month, and it drops to around 20 years. The math of compound growth is counterintuitive enough that most people dramatically underestimate what's achievable on ordinary incomes over normal working timescales. This is what becoming rich from nothing actually looks like mathematically. Not an overnight event, not a lottery win or a startup exit. A process sustained over time, powered by the combination of consistent saving, reasonable investing, and the relentless geometric engine of compound returns. Boring, absolutely. Effective, extraordinarily. Chapter 2. The Income Foundation. Building the Engine. You cannot save your way to wealth on an income that doesn't cover your basic needs. This seems obvious when stated directly, but a meaningful portion of personal finance content, particularly the extreme frugality corner of it, operates as if spending optimization alone, without income growth, is a viable path to financial independence for most people. It usually isn't, so before we talk about what you do with money, we need to talk about generating enough of it. Income is the engine of wealth building. It's not the only factor. We've established that your savings rate and investment behavior matter enormously. But without sufficient fuel, the engine doesn't run. This chapter is about building that engine, understanding the income landscape, identifying the highest leverage ways to grow your earnings, and developing the income foundation that makes everything else possible. The income hierarchy. Not all income is created equal, and understanding the hierarchy of income types is important for making good decisions about where to direct your energy. At the bottom of the hierarchy is what we might call trapped income. Income you're generating, but that has no growth ceiling and no leverage. Hourly work with no path to advancement. Gig economy work where your income is directly proportional to your hours. Side hustles that require your constant active participation. This income is real and valuable. There is no shame in any honest work, but it has a structural limitation. It scales only with your time, and your time is finite. Above, trapped income is levered employment income, a salary or compensation package that grows over time through performance, promotion, negotiation, and job switching. This is the income type that most people have or are building toward, and it has genuine growth potential. We'll talk extensively about how to maximize it. Above employment income is business income, where you're building something that generates revenue beyond your direct personal output. A business with employees, systems, and processes can generate income that isn't directly proportional to your hours. This is where the significant wealth creation stories typically happen. It's also harder, riskier, and less accessible than employment, which is why we'll treat it as an accelerator rather than a prerequisite. At the top is investment income. Returns generated by capital you've already accumulated. This is the passive income that financial independence is built on. It's not a starting point, it's a destination that your employment and business income funds over time. Understanding the hierarchy means understanding that most people's path runs through levered employment income first, possibly through some form of business income second, and eventually into investment income as the terminal state. Trying to skip directly to investment income without building the income foundation first is like trying to fill a pool without turning on the water supply. The most powerful income move. Most people never make. If you're an employee, and the majority of people reading this are, the single highest leverage income action available to you is one that most people either never attempt or execute poorly. Negotiating your salary aggressively and switching jobs strategically. The data on this is consistent and striking. Annual raises at most companies average 3% to 5% in normal conditions, roughly in line with inflation, meaning your real purchasing power is essentially flat year over year if you rely on the standard merit increase cycle. Job switches, by contrast, typically produce salary increases of 10% to 25%, with jumps of 30% to 40% not uncommon in high-demand fields. Over a career, the compounding effect of this difference is enormous. An employee who stays at one company and accepts the annual merit increase cycle may earn significantly less over 20 years than an equivalent employee who changes jobs every 3 to 4 years for better compensation. The loyalty premium, the financial reward for staying, is often negative, Many companies simply pay new hires more than they pay existing employees of equivalent capability because new hire salaries are set by current market rates while existing employee salaries are anchored to what they were hired at years ago. The discomfort of salary negotiation and job switching is real. The financial cost of avoiding that discomfort is also real and considerably larger. This is one of those areas where the math is so clearly in favor of action that the only barrier is psychological, and we'll address the psychological barriers extensively in Chapter 5. Negotiation. The basics that most people skip salary negotiation is a skill. Like most skills, it improves with practice and degrades with avoidance. The basics are straightforward enough that most people can execute them reasonably well on the first attempt, and reasonably well is enough to produce meaningful results. The foundation of a good negotiation is market data. Before any salary conversation, whether it's a job offer or a raise request, know what the role pays in your market. Use Glassdoor, LinkedIn Salary, Levels.fyi for technology roles, industry salary surveys, and conversations with people in similar roles at other companies. The goal is to arrive at the conversation with a defensible market range, not just a number you'd like to earn. The opening move in a job offer negotiation is almost always to counter. Not aggressively, not emotionally, but simply. The initial offer is rarely the final offer. Responding with a counter that's at or slightly above the top of your researched market range, delivered confidently and without apology, opens a negotiation that more often than not moves in your direction. The research consistently shows that the majority of employers expect negotiation and that counteroffers are accepted or partially accepted more often than they're rejected outright. What people fear most about negotiation, that the offer will be rescinded, almost never happens. Job offers are not rescinded because candidates negotiated politely. They're occasionally rescinded for other reasons, but a respectful counter is not one of them. The cost of asking is low. The benefit of a successful counter compounds over the entire subsequent career at that employer, since future raises are typically calculated as percentages of base salary. Building skills. That the market pays for income growth isn't just about negotiating more aggressively for what your current skills are worth. It's also about making your skills worth more, deliberately developing capabilities that command higher compensation in the labor market. The principle here is specialization within high-demand areas. Generic skills pay generic wages. Specific, rare, demonstrably valuable skills pay premium wages. The question is, which skills are worth developing, and the answer is always market-specific. It depends on what your industry and function value, what your current skill set lacks, and what you can realistically develop in a reasonable time frame. A useful framework. Skills that increase in value tend to share some combination of 3 characteristics. They're difficult to develop, requiring significant time, training, or experience that limits supply. They solve expensive problems, addressing issues that organizations will pay significantly to resolve. And they're difficult to automate, relying on judgment, creativity, relationship management, or other capabilities that resist algorithmic replacement. Technical skills in high-demand fields, software engineering, data science, quantitative finance, specialized medicine, skilled trades in shortage, meet these criteria well. High-level management and leadership skills, the ability to build, motivate, and direct teams toward complex goals, also meet them. Sales and business development skills, the ability to generate revenue for an organization, are perhaps the most durably compensated of all because the value is directly measurable. The investment in skill development is one of the highest return investments available, and unlike financial investments, it can't be lost in a market downturn. The challenge is that it requires directed effort over extended periods, which is why most people opt for more passive approaches to income growth and wonder why their earnings plateau. The side income question. Here's the honest answer to whether you should pursue side income as part of your wealth building strategy. It depends, and the dependency is on what type of side income you're pursuing and at what cost. Side income that leverages skills you already have, generates a meaningful hourly return after expenses and taxes, and doesn't significantly impair your ability to perform in your primary job or invest in skills development that grows your primary income. This type of side income can be a genuinely powerful accelerator. Side income that requires building skills from scratch in an unfamiliar field generates a low effective hourly rate when fully accounted for, and consumes time that would otherwise go toward sleep, relationships, health, or career development in your primary field. This type of side income may be net negative to your overall wealth trajectory despite producing nominal cash flow. The highest value side income is almost always an extension of what you already do well. A software engineer who takes freelance development projects, a marketer who does consulting for small businesses, a teacher who tutors or creates educational content, an accountant who prepares tax returns during filing season. The skill overlap means faster ramp-up, higher quality, and better effective hourly rates than starting something entirely new. The worst side income is time-intensive gig work with low effective returns that keeps you busy without meaningfully accelerating your financial trajectory. Feeling productive is not the same as being productive. Hours matter. If those hours would be better spent investing in your primary career, resting so you can perform better in your primary job, or spending with people who matter to you, the nominal income from side gigs may not be worth the real cost. Chapter 3. The savings rate, the most important number in your financial life. Here's a statement that sounds like hyperbole but is mathematically accurate. Your savings rate is more important to your wealth building trajectory than your investment returns, your income level, or your specific investment strategy, more important than all three combined. This is counterintuitive because investing and income get almost all of the attention in financial media. Picking the right stocks, finding the right fund manager, earning more money, these are the topics that generate interest and clicks and conversation. Savings rate is boring. It's just a percentage. It doesn't make for exciting content, but the math is unambiguous. Let's demonstrate it. Two people. Person A earns $100,000 per year and saves 10%, $10,000 annually. Person B earns $70,000 per year and saves 30%, $21,000 annually. Person B, despite earning 30% less than Person A, is saving more than twice as much every year. At a 7% return, Person A reaches $1 million in approximately 30 years. Person B reaches $1 million in approximately 24 years, 6 years earlier, on 30% less income. Not because of better investment returns, not because of better stock picks, because the savings rate determines how much fuel the engine gets, and more fuel reaches the destination faster. Now extend that comparison further. Person A's low savings rate doesn't just slow accumulation, it also implies a high expense lifestyle that requires a larger financial independence number because that lifestyle needs to be funded indefinitely. Person B's high savings rate implies lower expenses and a smaller financial independence number, plus faster accumulation toward it. The gap in outcomes between identical incomes at different savings rates played out over a career is not incremental, it's transformational. What savings rate should you target? The conventional financial planning advice, save 10% to 15% of your income, is fine advice for people who want to retire at 65 and have a comfortable but not dramatically accelerated financial trajectory. It is not advice for people who want to build wealth significantly faster than the median. Here's how savings rate maps to approximate time to financial independence, assuming 7% real returns and investing into a diversified portfolio. Savings rate of 10%, approximately 43 years to financial independence. Savings rate of 20%, approximately 32 years. Savings rate of 30%, approximately 26 years. Savings rate of 40%, approximately 21 years. Savings rate of 50%, approximately 17 years. Savings rate of 60%, approximately 13 years. Savings rate of 70%, approximately 10 years. These numbers are approximate and depend on return assumptions, expense levels, and other variables. But the relationship is clear. Moving from a 10% savings rate to a 30% savings rate cuts roughly 17 years off the timeline. Moving from 10% to 50% cuts 26 years. You can buy decades of your life back with savings rate decisions that are entirely within your control. The target savings rate for serious wealth building is generally considered to be 25% to 50% of take-home income, depending on your income level and your timeline ambitions. At lower incomes, achieving high savings rates is genuinely harder because fixed costs consume a larger share of income. We discussed this extensively in the credit score video's coverage of the income problem, and the math is similarly constrained here. But even at modest income levels, Moving from 10% to 20% savings produces a meaningful timeline improvement. The gap is the goal. Your savings rate is determined by one thing: the gap between what you earn and what you spend. This seems tautological, but it's worth stating clearly because it identifies where the leverage lives. You can widen the gap from two directions: earn more or spend less. Most financial advice focuses almost entirely on one side or the other, either income growth or expense reduction, when the most powerful approach works both sides simultaneously. Every dollar of income growth that doesn't get absorbed by lifestyle expansion becomes a dollar of savings. Every dollar of permanently reduced expenses both widens the gap immediately and reduces the financial independence target. The enemy of the gap is lifestyle inflation, the tendency for spending to expand proportionally with income, keeping the gap constant regardless of how much income grows. We covered lifestyle inflation in the previous video in this series, but it's relevant enough here to restate the core principle. The single most financially powerful habit available to income earners is directing a significant portion of every income increase to savings before the lifestyle has a chance to adapt to the higher income. This one behavioral pattern, applied consistently over a career, produces dramatically different outcomes than the default behavior of spending income as it arrives. Automating the gap. The behavioral mechanism that makes high savings rates sustainable, not in theory but in actual practice for actual humans who have actual spending temptations, is automation. Automated savings means the money moves before you see it, before your brain has registered it as available, before it can compete in the mental accounting framework against everything else you could spend it on. Payroll deductions to retirement accounts work this way. The contribution happens before the paycheck arrives, so your perceived income is already the lower amount. Automated transfers from checking to savings on payday work similarly. The money is moved so quickly after arrival that it never feels available. The psychological mechanism is simple but powerful. You can only spend money you feel like you have. Money that has moved to a separate account before you've processed its arrival doesn't feel available in the way that money sitting in your checking account does. You adapt to the lower effective income without the psychological cost of consciously deciding not to spend each time. This is not a trick. It's behavioral science applied to financial systems. The people who maintain high savings rates over long periods are almost universally people who've automated the savings so that the discipline is built into the system rather than required as a daily act of willpower. Willpower is unreliable. Systems are reliable. Design the system. The expense audit, where the money actually goes. Before you can significantly increase your savings rate, you need to know where your money is currently going, with actual data, not estimates. People are systematically bad at estimating their own spending, consistently underestimating discretionary categories by 20% to 40%. The expense audit process: go through 3 months of bank statements and credit card statements and categorize every transaction. Not the categories you think you're spending in, the categories that actually appear in the data. Housing, transportation, food, split into groceries and dining, subscriptions, clothing, entertainment, healthcare, personal care, miscellaneous. The total will often surprise you. Not because you're irresponsible, just because small regular expenses accumulate invisibly in ways that don't feel significant in the moment but add up dramatically over time. Subscriptions are the canonical example. The average American carries multiple active subscriptions they either don't use or don't consciously think about, collectively running to hundreds of dollars per month. The audit has one purpose: to give you accurate data for making decisions about where reductions are possible without meaningfully reducing your quality of life. Not every expense reduction represents sacrifice. Many reductions, when examined honestly, address spending that wasn't producing commensurate value in the first place. A gym membership used twice a month, a streaming service watched occasionally, a habit purchase made mindlessly rather than deliberately. The big three, where structural savings live. Here's the honest version of expense reduction that most personal finance content doesn't give you. The small stuff doesn't move the needle very much. Cutting daily coffees, brown bagging lunch, canceling Netflix, These produce real but modest savings. If your financial gap needs widening by $500 or $1,000 per month, you won't find it in the small stuff without genuinely punishing sacrifice. The meaningful savings live in what personal finance researchers call the big three: housing, transportation, and food. These three categories typically account for 60% to 70% of the average American household spending. Meaningful reductions in any one of them produce more savings than all the small optimizations combined. And the decisions in these categories are structural, made periodically, producing ongoing savings without requiring daily willpower. Housing is typically the largest single expense. The decision of how much to spend on housing, whether to buy or rent, how much space you actually need, how much location premium you're paying, determines a monthly number that recurs for years. The difference between spending 25% of take-home income on housing versus 35% can easily be $400 to $800 per month that either goes to savings or doesn't. This is a decision made once and felt every month. Transportation is the second largest in most households. The car decision, whether to own it all, what to own, whether to finance a new car or buy a used one outright, carries a similar structural weight. The average American car payment is over $700 per month for a new vehicle. Owning a reliable used car without a payment, combined with reasonable insurance, can reduce monthly transportation costs by $400 to $600 compared to a financed new vehicle. That difference, invested consistently, is transformative over a decade. Food is the most controllable of the three and also the one where reduction most directly impacts daily quality of life. Cooking at home more frequently, planning meals to reduce waste, making deliberate rather than impulsive grocery choices, these produce real savings without requiring deprivation. Dining out is the primary driver of elevated food spending for most households, and reducing dining out frequency, not eliminating it, just reducing it, typically produces $150 to $300 in monthly savings without making anyone miserable. Optimize the big three. Let the small stuff go unless you enjoy the optimization. The return on attention is dramatically higher in the structural categories than in the daily habit categories. Chapter 4. Investing. The part everyone overcomplicates. Let's establish something right at the start of this chapter that will save you an enormous amount of time, stress, and potentially money. Investing successfully does not require intelligence, expertise, special access, financial sophistication, or the ability to predict what the market is going to do. It requires understanding a small number of principles, making a small number of good decisions, and then, this is the hard part, leaving those decisions alone for a long time while the math does the work. The financial services industry has a vested interest in making investing seem complicated. Complicated investing justifies financial advisors who charge fees, actively managed funds that charge higher fees, trading platforms that make money on transaction volume, and financial media that sells advertising by generating daily anxiety about market movements. Complexity is profitable for the people selling financial products. It is not profitable for you. For you, simplicity is the edge. Here's what the evidence says about investing, accumulated over decades of academic research and empirical analysis. Stated as plainly as possible, most actively managed funds underperform the market over long periods. Most individual stock pickers underperform the market over long periods. Most people who try to time the market, buying when things look good, selling when things look scary, underperform people who simply invest consistently and never touch their investments. And the single most reliable predictor of investment returns is not strategy selection or manager quality or market timing. It's costs. Low-cost investing beats high-cost investing reliably over time because every dollar paid in fees is a dollar not compounding. This is the foundation of the investing approach we're going to discuss. Not because it's the most exciting approach, because it's the one that actually works for most people most of the time. Understanding what you're actually doing when you invest. Before we get into mechanics, let's make sure we have a clear mental model of what investing actually is, because the word gets used in so many ways that its meaning gets blurry. When you buy a share of stock, you're buying a small ownership stake in a business. That business employs people, sells products or services, generates revenue, and ideally produces profit. Your return as a shareholder comes from two sources: the the business growing in value over time, capital appreciation, and the business distributing a portion of its profits directly to shareholders, dividends. The stock market is simply the mechanism by which these ownership stakes are bought and sold between willing buyers and sellers. When you buy a bond, you're lending money to a company or government in exchange for regular interest payments and the return of your principal at the end of the loan term. Bonds are generally less volatile than stocks and generate lower long-term returns. They're the stability component of a portfolio rather than the growth component. When you buy a real estate investment, you're acquiring a physical or financial stake in property that generates income through rents and potentially appreciates in value over time. Real estate can be owned directly, buying a property, or indirectly through real estate investment trusts, or REITs, which are publicly traded companies that own real estate portfolios. The reason stocks have historically produced higher long-term returns than bonds or cash is not mysterious. Stocks represent ownership in businesses, and businesses in aggregate generate economic value over time. The economy grows. Businesses grow with it. Shareholders participate in that growth. The volatility of stock prices, the terrifying drops that happen periodically, is the price of admission for the higher long-term returns. There is no free lunch in investing. The return is compensation for tolerating the volatility. The index fund revelation. In the 1970s, a man named John Bogle had a simple but revolutionary idea. Instead of paying expensive managers to try to pick stocks that would beat the market, why not simply buy all the stocks in the market, in proportion to their size, and accept the market's return at a fraction of the cost? The resulting product, the index fund, is arguably the most important innovation in the history of personal finance. An index fund doesn't try to beat the market. It tries to match it at minimal cost by holding every stock in a given index, like the S&P 500, which contains the 500 largest publicly traded U.S. companies, in proportion to their market weight. The performance record of index funds versus actively managed funds is one of the most thoroughly documented findings in financial research. Over periods of 10 years or more, approximately 80% to 90% of actively managed funds underperform their benchmark index after fees. Over 20 years, the underperformance rate approaches 90% to 95%. The exceptions, the managers who consistently beat the market over long periods, are sufficiently rare that reliably identifying them in advance is essentially impossible. Why does active management underperform? Several reasons work together. Higher fees reduce returns directly. Trading costs reduce returns. The effort of trying to beat the market doesn't reliably produce returns above the market, and the market itself incorporates information so efficiently, reflecting the collective analysis of millions of participants, that consistently finding mispriced securities is extraordinarily difficult. The practical implication: for most investors, most of the time, a simple portfolio of low-cost index funds will outperform a portfolio of actively managed funds, not because of superior strategy, but because of lower costs and the baseline market return that everyone participating in the economy deserves to receive. The three-fund portfolio: simple, evidence-based, effective. The simplest evidence-based portfolio that meets the needs of most wealth-building investors is what's often called the three-fund portfolio. It consists of exactly three funds: a U.S. total market index fund, covering the entire U.S. stock market, including large, mid, and small cap companies. This is your primary growth engine. An international total market index fund, covering stocks in developed and emerging markets outside the U.S. This provides geographic diversification. A U.S. bond index fund, covering the U.S. bond market. This provides stability and reduces portfolio volatility. That's it. Three funds. At Vanguard, Fidelity, or Schwab, the three dominant low-cost fund providers, you can build this portfolio with expense ratios of 0.03% to 0.10% per year. That means for every $10,000 invested, you're paying $3 to $10 in annual fees. Compare that to actively managed funds that often charge 0.5% to 1.5% or more, $50 to $150 per year per $10,000 invested, and the cost advantage of index investing becomes vivid. How to allocate across the three funds: a reasonable general guideline. Your age in bonds: The rest split between US and international stocks. A 30-year-old might hold 30% bonds and 70% stocks. A 50-year-old might hold 50% bonds and 50% stocks. This is a simplified rule of thumb, not a precise prescription, but it captures the general principle that younger investors can tolerate more volatility because they have more time to recover from downturns, while older investors approaching the period when they'll need to draw on their investments benefit from more stability. More aggressive allocation, higher stock percentage, is appropriate for investors with a long time horizon, high risk tolerance, and stable income. More conservative allocation, higher bond percentage, is appropriate for investors approaching their financial independence target or with lower risk tolerance. Neither is universally correct. Both are legitimate depending on circumstances. The account types that change everything. Before we talk about what to invest in, we need to talk about where to invest, because the account type you use determines the tax treatment of your returns, and the difference in outcomes between tax-advantaged and taxable investing is substantial over long periods. The primary tax-advantaged accounts available to most workers, the 401k, or 403b for nonprofit and education employees, is an employer-sponsored retirement account that allows contributions of up to $23,000 per year in 2024, with higher limits for those over 50. Traditional 401k contributions reduce your taxable income today. You invest pre-tax dollars and pay taxes on withdrawals in retirement. Roth 401k contributions are made with after-tax dollars but grow tax-free with no taxes on qualified withdrawals. Many employers offer a match, free money contributed to your account based on your own contributions, which is an immediate 50% to 100% return on the matched amount and should be captured before anything else. The IRA, Individual Retirement Account, allows contributions of up to $7,000 per year in 2024. Traditional IRA contributions may be tax deductible depending on your income and whether you have an employer plan. Roth IRA contributions are made with after-tax dollars and grow completely tax-free. The Roth IRA is particularly powerful for people early in their careers who are in lower tax brackets. You pay taxes now at a low rate, and the potentially decades of growth are never taxed. The HSA, Health Savings Account, is available to people with high deductible health insurance plans and is the most tax-advantaged account that exists. Contributions are pre-tax. Growth is tax-free. Withdrawals for qualified medical expenses are tax-free. It's a triple tax advantage that no other account type offers. People who can afford to pay current medical expenses out of pocket and invest their HSA contributions rather than spending them are building a tax-free pool of capital that can be used tax-free for medical expenses in retirement when medical costs tend to be highest. The sequencing of where to invest matters. Capture the full employer match first. This is the highest guaranteed return available. Then maximize the Roth IRA if you qualify. Income limits apply. Then maximize the 401k. Then invest in taxable brokerage accounts. This sequence maximizes tax efficiency before moving to taxable accounts, where investment returns are subject to capital gains taxes. The behavior gap. Why investors underperform their own investments. Here's one of the most striking findings in behavioral finance. The average investor earns significantly less than the average investment they hold. Studies by Dalbar and others consistently find that the average mutual fund investor earns several percentage points less per year than the funds they're invested in would suggest. How is that possible? The fund returns are the returns. The investor holds the fund. The investor should receive the fund's return, except investors don't hold the fund. They buy when things are going up, when the news is good, when confidence is high, when recent performance is making the investment feel safe and exciting. They sell when things are going down, when the news is bad, when confidence is low, when recent losses are making the investment feel dangerous and frightening. Buy high, sell low, the opposite of what produces returns. This behavior gap, the difference between what investments return and what investors receive, is primarily emotional. The market drops 30%. It feels catastrophic. Every financial news outlet is broadcasting doom. Friends and colleagues are talking about selling. The rational response, do nothing or buy more while prices are lower, is extraordinarily difficult to execute. in the moment, because it requires acting against every emotional signal. The investors who capture the full return of their investments are the ones who've either automated their investing so thoroughly that they never face the emotional decision, or who've internalized the mathematics of market cycles deeply enough to maintain equanimity during downturns that they know, historically and statistically, are temporary. The simplest behavioral protection: automate everything. Set up automatic contributions to your 401k and IRA. Set up automatic investments in your brokerage account. Choose your allocation, set up the automation, and then, this is the instruction that requires the most discipline. Do not look at it frequently, do not change it in response to market movements, and do not make investment decisions based on financial news. The news is optimized to generate anxiety. Anxiety is the enemy of good investment behavior. Limit exposure. Real estate, the alternative that works for some people. No discussion of building wealth from nothing is complete without addressing real estate, partly because it's a genuine wealth-building vehicle for many people, and partly because it's so heavily mythologized that separating the reality from the hype requires some effort. Real estate as a wealth-building strategy has genuine advantages. Leverage, the ability to control a $300,000 asset with a $30,000 down payment, amplifies returns in ways that stock investing doesn't offer at retail. Forced savings, each mortgage payment builds equity rather than paying rent with no ownership accumulation. Cash flow, rental properties can generate monthly income above the cost of the mortgage, taxes, insurance, and maintenance. Tax advantages, depreciation deductions, mortgage interest deductions, 1,031 exchanges that defer capital gains taxes on sold properties. Real estate also has genuine disadvantages that get less airtime in the content produced by people who are selling real estate courses or managing real estate investment communities. It's illiquid. You can't sell 10% of your rental property when you need cash the way you can sell 10% of your stock portfolio. It requires active management, tenants, maintenance, vacancies, legal obligations that stocks don't. It's geographically concentrated. Your real estate portfolio is exposed to the specific market where your properties are located, and the returns, when honestly calculated to include all costs, time, and risk, are often more modest than the gross figures suggest. For people who enjoy managing properties, have the capital to invest, and are operating in markets with favorable rent-to-price ratios, direct real estate investment can be an excellent wealth-building vehicle. For people who want real estate exposure without the operational burden, REITs, real estate investment trusts, provide it within a standard brokerage account with full liquidity and professional management. For most beginning wealth builders, the honest advice is maximize your tax-advantaged investing first. If you still have capital after that and real estate genuinely interests you, pursue it with clear eyes about the real costs and realistic expectations about returns. Don't pursue it because you watched a YouTube video with a thumbnail of someone standing in front of a rental property looking very pleased with themselves. The boring portfolio that beats almost everything. Let's make this as concrete as possible. If you want to build wealth from nothing through investing, here is the approach that the evidence supports and that requires the least ongoing attention. Open accounts at Vanguard, Fidelity, or Schwab. Start with a Roth IRA if you qualify, then a 401k through your employer, then a taxable brokerage account. Buy a total U.S. stock market index fund, FXAIX, VTSAX, SWTSX, or their ETF equivalents, VTIFZROX, depending on your brokerage. This is your core holding. Add a total international stock market index fund, VTIAX, FZILX, or VXUS, for geographic diversification. Add a bond index fund, BND, FXNAX, or equivalent, in proportion to your risk tolerance and time horizon. Set up automatic monthly contributions. Reinvest dividends automatically. Do not change your allocation in response to market movements. Do not try to time the market. Do not check your balance obsessively. Review annually. Rebalance if your allocation has drifted significantly. Increase contributions when income grows. That's the portfolio. That's the strategy. The people who execute this with consistency over 20 to 30 years will build significant wealth from nothing. Not because they found a secret, because they did the boring thing consistently while most other people we're distracted by noise. Chapter 5. The Psychology of Money. Where most people actually fail. Everything we've covered so far, the income, strategies, the savings rate math, the investing framework, is, at its core, straightforward. The concepts are not complicated. The math is accessible. The steps are clearly defined. If wealth building from nothing were purely an intellectual exercise, the information in the first 4 chapters of this video would be sufficient, and most people who watch them would execute successfully. But building wealth from nothing is not purely an intellectual exercise. It's a psychological exercise conducted over years and decades against a backdrop of social pressure, emotional triggers, cognitive biases, cultural messaging, and the simple human difficulty of prioritizing the future over the present when the present is immediate and the future is abstract. The place where most people fail is not in their understanding of index funds. It's in their psychology, their relationship with money, their emotional responses to financial stress and opportunity, and the stories they tell themselves about what they deserve and what's possible for them. This chapter is about the psychological side, not in a soft motivational poster way, in the specific mechanistic, evidence-based way that explains why people with sufficient knowledge to build wealth often don't, and what you can do about it. The arrival fallacy and the moving goalpost. There is a well-documented psychological phenomenon called the arrival fallacy. The belief that a future achievement or acquisition will produce lasting happiness. When I make $100,000, I'll finally feel financially secure. When I pay off my student loans, I'll be able to relax. When I reach $500,000 in investments, I'll feel rich. The research on hedonic adaptation, covered in the previous video in this series, tells us what actually happens. We reach the milestone. We feel briefly satisfied. The satisfaction fades within weeks to months as we adapt to the new normal, and then a new milestone appears on the horizon as the new target, and the pattern repeats. In personal finance, this manifests as the moving goalpost, the phenomenon where people who achieve significant financial milestones immediately recalibrate their definition of enough upward. The person who thought $100,000 in savings would feel like security reaches $100,000 and discovers that it doesn't feel like enough anymore. Now they need $200,000 to feel secure. The person who thought a 6-figure income would eliminate financial stress reaches 6 figures and finds new sources of financial anxiety. At the higher expense level, their lifestyle has expanded to match. The arrival fallacy and the moving goalpost are psychological enemies of wealth building because they prevent satisfaction with genuine progress, generate perpetual financial anxiety regardless of objective position, and create the conditions for the hedonic adaptation-driven lifestyle inflation that closes the savings gap. The corrective is not to lower your ambitions. It's to decouple your sense of well-being from financial milestones and reconnect it with the process, the daily behaviors, the consistent habits, the trajectory, rather than any specific destination. People who are psychologically healthy around money are not people who've stopped caring about their financial outcomes. They're people who found meaning in the practice of good financial behavior rather than only in the achievement of specific targets. The comparison trap at the wealth building level. We covered social comparison in the context of credit scores and spending. It applies equally, perhaps more powerfully, to the wealth building context because the specific comparisons that distort financial decision-making most severely are the ones involving perceived wealth. The problem: your peer group's financial situation is largely invisible to you. You see what people spend. You don't see what they owe. You see the house, the car, the vacation, the renovation. You don't see the mortgage, the car loan, the credit card balance, the home equity line of credit that funded the renovation. The visible wealth signals are systematically misleading because they show consumption without showing the debt that often funds it. This creates a comparison environment where you're measuring yourself against a benchmark that's both invisible in its debt component and systematically skewed upward by the most visibly successful people in your network. The result is a chronic sense of financial inadequacy, of being behind, that's based on fundamentally inaccurate information. The specific damage to wealth building Social comparison drives spending decisions designed to close a perceived gap, to achieve or maintain a lifestyle level that's consistent with your peer group or aspirational reference group, rather than spending decisions aligned with your actual financial goals. You buy the nicer car not because you need it or genuinely want it, but because the one you have feels inconsistent with where you believe you should be relative to your peers. You upgrade the apartment not because the current one is inadequate, but because it doesn't signal the financial status you're trying to project. The people who build significant wealth from nothing are, almost universally, people who've developed immunity to this specific form of social comparison. Not by becoming indifferent to social connection, but by decoupling their financial decisions from social signaling. They're comfortable driving the reasonable car when friends drive nicer ones. They're comfortable living in the modest house when colleagues live in larger ones. Not because they're ascetics or misanthropes, because they understand clearly that the gap between what they have and what their social reference group displays is often an illusion funded by debt, and that the path they're on leads somewhere better than the path the status signaling behavior leads to. The scarcity mindset versus the abundance mindset. Done honestly. The scarcity versus abundance mindset distinction has been thoroughly colonized by self-help content that strips it of meaning. Let's reclaim it with a more honest and specific framing. A scarcity mindset in the financial context is not primarily about negativity or limiting beliefs in the motivational sense. It's a cognitive mode documented extensively in behavioral economics research that emerges from genuine financial stress and produces specific decision-making impairments. When you're managing tight finances, the cognitive bandwidth consumed by financial worry genuinely reduces your capacity for longer-term planning, impulse control, and the kind of deliberate decision-making that good financial behavior requires. This means that financial stress doesn't just feel bad. It makes financial decision-making worse, which produces more financial stress, which further impairs decision-making. The cycle is real and documented, and breaking it requires reducing the financial stress itself, getting above the fragility threshold, building the buffer, eliminating the sources of chronic financial anxiety, rather than simply thinking differently while the stressors remain. The abundance mindset, stripped of its self-help gloss, means something specific and useful. It means operating from a mental framework in which good financial decisions are additive, in which every dollar saved, every debt eliminated, every investment made is a step in a positive direction, rather than a framework in which financial management feels like pure deprivation and sacrifice. This mental shift doesn't happen through affirmations. It happens through evidence, through building enough financial progress that the trajectory starts to feel real rather than theoretical, through reaching milestones that confirm the path is working, through experiencing the compounding in your account that makes the math feel alive rather than abstract. The practical implication: getting your first significant financial win, whatever that looks like for your starting point, is disproportionately important, not just for the financial progress it represents, but for the psychological shift it enables. The first $10,000 saved, the first debt eliminated, the first time your investment account growth in a month exceeds your contribution. These are evidence events that update your mental model from "this might work" to "this is working," and that update is the foundation of the sustained psychological engagement that long-term wealth building requires. Money scripts, the inherited beliefs. Determining your financial behavior. Financial psychologists use the term money scripts to describe the beliefs about money that we absorb in childhood and carry into adult financial behavior, often without ever examining them consciously. Money scripts come from family, environments, the emotional tone of money conversations, the behaviors modeled by parents and caregivers, the explicit and implicit messages about what money means and who deserves it. They come from cultural environments, the attitudes toward wealth, debt, and financial ambition embedded in your community and cultural background, and they come from formative experiences, financial trauma, scarcity, windfalls, or other significant money events that shaped your emotional relationship with financial matters. Common money scripts that interfere with wealth building. Money is the root of all evil, or its variants. Wealthy people are greedy. Wanting more is selfish. This script produces guilt around accumulating wealth, resistance to financial ambition, and sometimes self-sabotaging behavior that prevents financial progress. It's worth examining whether your religious, cultural, or family background has installed a belief that financial success is morally problematic. Because if it has, that belief will fight every wealth-building behavior from the inside. There will never be enough. This script produces chronic financial anxiety regardless of objective financial position, difficulty enjoying financial progress, and sometimes hoarding behavior or excessive risk aversion that prevents wealth building. It often comes from genuine past scarcity and is a rational response to a historical environment that no longer applies. I don't deserve to be rich. This script, related to what psychologists call wealth wounds, produces unconscious behaviors that prevent or reverse wealth accumulation, including self-sabotage at critical financial decision points, giving money away to the point of personal detriment, and making systematically poor financial decisions when larger sums are involved. Rich people are just lucky. This script produces a passive orientation toward financial outcomes. Things happen to you rather than being driven by your decisions, and discourages the active, deliberate behaviors that actually produce wealth. Identifying your money scripts is not a therapeutic exercise divorced from practical finance. It's directly relevant to behavior, because behavior that's inconsistent with your conscious financial goals is often being driven by unconscious scripts. The person who keeps self-sabotaging their savings progress may be operating from a "money is evil" script. The person who can never feel financially safe regardless of objective security may be running a "there will never be enough" script. Naming the script is the first step to questioning it and replacing it with beliefs that are both more accurate and more supportive of the financial behavior you're trying to build. The long game mindset. Thinking in decades, not months. Here is the single most important psychological shift available to someone trying to build wealth from nothing, learning to think in decades rather than in months. Most financial behavior is driven by short-term thinking, by how decisions feel right now, by what they produce in the near term, by the immediate comparison to alternatives. Should I invest this $500 or take that trip? Should I negotiate for a raise or avoid the discomfort of the conversation? Should I keep saving at this rate or reward myself for the progress I've made? These feel like individual decisions. They are, but they're also expressions of a time preference, the degree to which you weight the present versus the future in your decision-making. People with a strong short-term time preference make individually reasonable-feeling decisions that collectively produce poor long-term outcomes. People with a longer time preference make individually uncomfortable decisions that collectively produce excellent long-term outcomes. Developing a longer time preference is partly a matter of knowledge. Understanding what decisions look like in 10 or 20 years changes how they feel today. Knowing that $500 invested today at 7% is worth approximately $2,000 in 20 years changes the trip versus invest calculus. Knowing that a successful salary negotiation that produces $5,000 more per year, invested consistently at 7%, is worth approximately $200,000 in 30 years changes the discomfort calculus of having the conversation. But knowledge alone isn't sufficient. The long game mindset also requires practice, deliberately making decisions with a longer horizon in mind until that orientation becomes default rather than effortful. It requires the kind of identity shift we discussed in the context of savings behavior, moving from "I'm trying to save" to "I'm someone who thinks about the long game." Identity-based behavior is more stable than motivation-based behavior because it doesn't depend on how you feel on any given day. The people who build wealth from nothing are, almost definitionally, people who've developed the long game mindset, who've internalized the mathematics of compounding deeply enough that they consistently make decisions that sacrifice short-term comfort for long-term position. This isn't martyrdom, it's not joyless, it's an orientation toward the future that makes the present behaviors feel purposeful rather than punishing, because they're connected to a trajectory that's real, measurable, and increasingly visible as progress accumulates. Dealing with failure and setbacks, building wealth from nothing over a decade or more will inevitably involve setbacks, job losses, medical expenses, market downturns, economic recessions, poor decisions, unexpected costs, relationships that complicate financial plans, life in short, which has a way of introducing complications that no financial plan fully anticipates. How you respond to setbacks is among the most important determinants of long-term financial outcomes. There are two failure patterns that derail most wealth-building attempts. The catastrophizing response, treating a setback as evidence that the whole project is futile, that wealth building isn't possible for you specifically, that you've failed in some fundamental way and the progress is gone. This response produces abandonment of good behaviors at exactly the moment when returning to them is most important. The shame spiral response, internalizing the setback as evidence of personal inadequacy, not just I made a poor financial decision, but I am bad with money, I am irresponsible, I am not the kind of person who can do this. Shame is the least useful emotional response to financial setbacks because it is incapacitating. It prevents the honest assessment and course correction that setbacks actually require. The functional response to financial setbacks is neither of these. It's what you might call the system's perspective. A setback is information. It identifies a gap in the plan, a risk that wasn't fully accounted for, a behavior that needs adjustment. The appropriate response is to assess honestly, understand what happened and why, adjust the plan to address the gap, and resume the behaviors. Not immediately and perfectly. Recovery from significant setbacks takes time, and the expectation of immediate return to previous position is unrealistic. But directionally, back toward the path with the knowledge gained from the setback, without the weight of catastrophe or shame. People who build wealth from nothing are not people who never experience setbacks. They are people who experience setbacks and continue. That persistence, more than any specific strategy or insight, is the defining characteristic of wealth-building success. Chapter 6. The Advanced Moves. What separates people who build real wealth from people who just earn good incomes. Here's a pattern that puzzles people who haven't thought carefully about it. Two people, same industry, similar roles, similar salaries, similar educational backgrounds, similar starting points. 20 years later, one has significant accumulated wealth, financial independence approaching or achieved, investment accounts well into seven figures, real financial options about how to spend their time. The other has a nice lifestyle, a house with equity in it, and a retirement account that'll probably be okay, but isn't life-changing. Same income, dramatically different outcomes. The difference is almost never about investment returns. It's almost never about lucky stock picks or a well-timed real estate purchase. It's about a specific set of decisions made early and sustained that most people either never learn about or know about intellectually, but never actually implement. These are the advanced moves. Not advanced in the sense of being technically complex, advanced in the sense that most people don't do them, and the people who do end up in dramatically different financial positions. Advanced move number 1, the gap maximization at every income inflection point. Every significant income increase is a binary decision point. Does the new income expand your lifestyle, or does it expand your savings rate? In practice, most people choose some combination of both. They let lifestyle expand some and save some more. The question is the ratio, and the ratio at every income inflection point determines your long-term financial trajectory more powerfully than almost any other single variable. The standard behavior: income increases by $1,000 per month, lifestyle adjusts, slightly nicer apartment, better car, more dining out, upgraded subscriptions, savings increase modestly, the gap widens a little but not dramatically. The wealth-building behavior: income increases by $1,000 per month, lifestyle either doesn't change at all or changes by a small fraction of the increase. The majority, 70%, 80%, 90% of the increase, goes directly to savings and investment before the lifestyle has adjusted to expect it. The mechanism that makes this work is timing. Lifestyle adaptation is rapid. Within weeks of a higher income arriving consistently, your spending patterns adjust to treat the higher income as the baseline. Once that adjustment has happened, reducing lifestyle to its previous level feels like a loss, and loss aversion makes it psychologically difficult. But if you redirect the increase before the adaptation happens, ideally through automatic transfer adjustments implemented on the first paycheck at the new rate, you never develop the lifestyle expectation to begin with. This principle applies at every income inflection point: job promotion, salary negotiation success, bonus, tax refund, side income development, inheritance, any windfall. The money arrives. The automatic systems direct the majority of it to investment. The lifestyle notices only a fraction of it, adapts to that fraction, and the accumulated wealth builds dramatically faster than it would under the standard pattern. The people who execute this consistently over a career typically have savings rates that progressively increase over time, from perhaps 15% early in their career to 30%, 40%, 50% as income grows. But lifestyle doesn't track it proportionally. The mathematical effect of this progressive savings rate increase, combined with the compound growth on an ever larger portfolio, is the primary engine of the how did they accumulate so much on that salary outcome that seems mysterious from the outside. Advanced move number 2, tax optimization as a wealth accelerator. Most people think about taxes the way they think about the weather, an unpleasant reality that arrives periodically, takes what it takes, and can't be meaningfully influenced. This is wrong. Taxes are one of the most significant ongoing costs in most people's financial lives, and the difference between passive and active tax management over a lifetime can amount to hundreds of thousands of dollars in additional wealth. We're not talking about anything illegal or even aggressive here. We're talking about using the tax code as it's designed to be used, taking advantage of the accounts, deductions, and strategies that exist specifically to encourage certain behaviors and that are available to any taxpayer who takes the time to understand them. The foundation, which we covered in Chapter 4, is maximizing tax-advantaged accounts, 401k, IRA, HSA. Let's go deeper on why this matters so much. Every dollar you contribute to a traditional 401k reduces your taxable income by $1. If you're in the 22% federal tax bracket and your state has a 5% income tax, each 401k dollar saves you 27 cents in current taxes. A $23,000 annual 401k contribution saves approximately $6,210 in taxes. Money that would otherwise go to the government is instead going to your retirement account, where it compounds tax deferred for decades. At a 7% return over 30 years, that $6,210 in tax savings becomes approximately $47,000. Roth accounts work differently but with equal power. Roth contributions don't reduce current taxes, but the growth and withdrawals are completely tax-free. For someone early in their career in a lower tax bracket, paying taxes now at 12% or 22% to lock in tax-free growth for decades can produce significantly better outcomes than deferring taxes to retirement when the withdrawal rate might put them in a similar or higher bracket. Beyond retirement accounts, the tax optimization toolkit includes tax loss harvesting and taxable brokerage accounts, selling positions that are at a loss to realize the tax loss, which can offset capital gains or reduce ordinary income by up to $3,000 per year. The position can be immediately replaced with a similar, but not identical investment to maintain market exposure. Asset location, placing different types of investments in different account types to minimize tax drag. Tax inefficient assets, bonds, REITs actively. Managed funds that generate lots of taxable distributions belong in tax-advantaged accounts. Tax-efficient assets, index funds with low turnover, growth stocks held long-term, are suitable for taxable accounts. Long-term capital gains optimization, holding investments for more than 1 year before selling to qualify for the lower long-term capital gains rate, 0%, 15%, or 20% depending on income, rather than the ordinary income rate that applies to short-term gains. Self-employment deductions for anyone with business income, the ability to deduct business expenses, contribute to a SEP, IRA, or solo 401k with much higher contribution limits than employee plans, and take the qualified business income deduction where applicable. The cumulative effect of thoughtful tax management is not trivial. A dollar saved in taxes is a dollar that compounds in your portfolio. Over decades, the difference between someone who maximizes their tax efficiency and someone who doesn't can easily exceed $300,000 to $500,000 in final portfolio value on identical incomes and identical investment strategies, simply because the tax-efficient investor kept more of their returns each year. Advanced move number 3, the employer benefits audit. This is one of the highest return, lowest effort wealth building activities available to employed people, and the majority of employees never do it. Your employer offers a set of benefits that represent real financial value, and many employees either don't fully understand what's available, don't take full advantage of what they know is available, or don't use the benefits in the most financially optimal way. The audit: spend 2 hours with your employee benefits documentation, the full documentation, not the summary, and catalog everything available to you, then assess whether you're using each benefit optimally. The employer match on the 401k is the most obvious one, and the one people are most likely to be leaving on the table. The full match is free money. Capturing it requires only contributing enough to trigger the full match. Many employees contribute less than the match threshold, meaning they're leaving employer contributions uncaptured, either because they don't know the threshold or because they're trying to minimize current paycheck deductions. This is one of the clearest cases in personal finance of leaving money on the table for no good reason. Employee stock purchase plans, ESPPs, are offered by many publicly traded companies and are genuinely remarkable deals for employees who use them. A typical ESPP allows employees to purchase company stock at a 10% to 15% discount from the market price using payroll deductions. The 15% discount represents an immediate 15% return on that investment, before any stock price appreciation, which is a return available on essentially no other investment. Most financial advisors recommend participating in ESPPs up to the allowed maximum and selling the shares immediately upon purchase to capture the guaranteed discount without taking on concentrated stock risk. Health savings accounts are, as noted, the most tax-advantaged investment account available. If your employer offers a high-deductible health plan with HSA compatibility and you're not maximizing the HSA contribution, you're leaving a triple tax-advantaged investment vehicle partially or fully unused. Flexible spending accounts for healthcare and dependent care allow pre-tax contributions that reduce your taxable income. Unlike HSAs, FSA funds are use it or lose it within the plan year, with a small rollover allowance. But for predictable healthcare or childcare costs, the tax savings are real and immediate. Life and disability insurance through employers is typically significantly cheaper than individual market coverage, often requiring no medical underwriting. Disability insurance in particular is catastrophically undervalued. Your income is your most important financial asset, and the probability of a disability preventing you from working is meaningfully higher than most people assume. Tuition assistance, professional development, and education benefits can fund skill development, the kind that increases market value and income, at employer expense rather than your own. Using these benefits to fund certifications, advanced degrees, or professional training that increases your earning capacity is a wealth-building lever that requires nothing but awareness of what's available and the initiative to use it. Advanced move number 4, strategic debt management. All debt is not equal. The wealth-building framework for debt is not, debt is bad, eliminate all debt as fast as possible. That's an oversimplification that produces suboptimal outcomes in both directions. The accurate framework, debt with an interest rate above your expected investment return, should be eliminated aggressively because paying it off is equivalent to earning a guaranteed after-tax return equal to the interest rate. Debt with an interest rate below your expected investment return should be managed but not necessarily paid off aggressively because the opportunity cost of extra principal payments exceeds the benefit. In practical terms, high-interest consumer debt, credit cards at 18% to 25%, personal loans at high rates, payday loans, should be eliminated before significant investing beyond the employer match. The guaranteed return of eliminating 22% interest debt vastly exceeds the expected return of investing in markets. Low-interest debt, a mortgage at 3% to 5%, federal student loans at moderate rates, car loans at low rates, presents a genuine choice between extra payments and investing the difference. Mathematically, the expected investment return typically exceeds the interest rate, making investing the better choice. Psychologically, the guaranteed return of debt elimination has value, and for people who sleep better with less debt, prioritizing it is legitimate even at a modest mathematical cost. The specific advanced move, using low-cost debt strategically as a lever, a mortgage taken on a property that generates cash flow above its carrying costs, uses other people's money to build equity in a real asset. A business loan that funds equipment or operations generating returns above the interest cost is productive debt. These are not the same as consumer debt used to fund consumption. The distinction is whether the debt finances something that generates returns or something that gets consumed. The debt payoff order, integrated with investing, that most wealth-building frameworks recommend: emergency fund first, employer match second, high-interest debt third, remaining tax-advantaged contributions fourth, additional low-interest debt payoff, and taxable investing in roughly equal balance depending on interest rates and preferences. Advanced move number 5, building multiple income streams. Here's the wealth acceleration move that gets the most hype in personal finance media and the most superficial treatment: multiple income streams. The hype is justified in principle, but catastrophically overblown in execution. Most people who pursue multiple income streams do it badly and produce marginal results. The people who do it well follow a specific pattern worth understanding. The pattern: your second income stream should be a natural extension of your primary expertise, developed gradually, monetized once it has real value, and scaled once the monetization model is proven. Not the opposite. Not, I'll start a dropshipping business because a YouTube ad told me it's passive income, but a genuine extension of something you actually know and do well. For an accountant, financial consulting for small businesses, tax preparation services, CFO for hire services for startups. The skills already exist. The market already values them. The barrier to entry is nothing more than finding the first client. For a software engineer, freelance development, technical consulting, open source project monetization, teaching programming skills, again, the skills are the asset. The market is already there. For a teacher, tutoring, curriculum development, online courses on your subject area, educational content creation, the pedagogical skills and subject expertise are already built. For a writer or marketer, freelance writing, content strategy consulting, copywriting, the craft is already developed. The income stream that emerges from existing expertise has several advantages over income streams built from scratch: faster ramp-up time, higher initial rates because you're already skilled, lower failure risk because you're doing something you demonstrably can do well, and better time efficiency because you're not learning while earning. The caution: second income streams have genuine costs, time, energy, sometimes money, and the opportunity cost of those costs needs to be accounted for. The relevant calculation is not just what the second income stream generates, but what it generates relative to what you could do with the same time invested differently: in rest, in relationships, in primary career development, in health. A side income that produces $500 per month but costs you the sleep quality, recovery time, and professional attention that was driving your primary career forward may be net negative to your overall wealth trajectory. The target: income streams that either leverage existing skills with minimal ramp-up, generate enough per hour to justify the time cost, or eventually become systematized enough to require less active maintenance. The goal is not busyness. The goal is additional wealth-building fuel delivered efficiently. Chapter 7: The Wealth-Destroying Mistakes. Almost everyone makes. For every advanced move that accelerates wealth building, there's a corresponding mistake that destroys it, sometimes slowly, invisibly, over years, sometimes quickly and dramatically. This chapter is a catalog of the most common and most costly mistakes made by people who are trying to build wealth but are unknowingly working against themselves. Mistake number 1: optimizing for income while ignoring the savings rate. This is perhaps the most widespread mistake in ambitious people's financial lives. High achievers focus intensely on income growth, chasing promotions, pursuing higher-paying opportunities, developing valuable skills, while treating spending as essentially unconstrained. The income grows impressively, the savings rate stays low, the wealth doesn't follow. A person earning $250,000 per year with a 5% savings rate, $12,500 annually invested, will accumulate less wealth than a person earning $100,000 per year with a 30% savings rate, $30,000 annually invested. Same effort invested in income optimization, dramatically different financial outcomes because the high earner's spending is consuming the advantage their income should be producing. The corrective is not to reduce your income ambition. It's to match it with an equal commitment to maintaining and growing the savings rate as income grows. Income ambition plus lifestyle discipline is the combination that produces wealth. Income ambition alone produces a high-income, low-net-worth life. a category that is far more common than the people in it would like to admit. Mistake number 2, carrying high-interest debt. While investing, we touched on this in the sequencing discussion, but it deserves emphasis as a standalone mistake because it's both common and genuinely costly. People who carry credit card balances at 20% to 25% interest while simultaneously contributing to investment accounts are paying a guaranteed 20% to 25% annual cost while earning an expected 7% to 8% annual return. The math is unambiguously negative. The rationalization is usually some version of, I need to keep investing for retirement, I can't stop. This is understandable but wrong. Paying off a 20% credit card is not stopping investing. It's investing with a guaranteed 20% return, better than any realistic investment return available. Once the high-interest debt is gone, the freed-up cash flow can go back to market investing, but now without the 20% guaranteed loss running simultaneously. The exception, the employer match. Capturing the full employer match, which represents a 50% to 100% guaranteed immediate return, takes precedence over debt payoff for most high-interest debt levels. But beyond the match, high-interest debt payoff beats additional investing every time the interest rate exceeds expected market returns. Mistake number 3, lifestyle creep without awareness. Lifestyle creep, the gradual, unnoticed expansion of spending that accompanies income growth, is the primary wealth destroyer for high earners. It operates invisibly because each individual spending increase seems reasonable. The slightly nicer apartment is justified because you're earning more. The car upgrade is justified because your old car had a lot of miles. The dining habits that have gradually shifted from cooking at home to eating out regularly happened so gradually you barely noticed. Each decision was individually defensible. Collectively, they've consumed every income gain and kept the gap, the space between income and spending that funds wealth building, stubbornly narrow despite years of income growth. The defense against lifestyle creep is not refusing every upgrade indefinitely. It's maintaining awareness of the aggregate lifestyle level and making deliberate choices about which upgrades are worth the ongoing cost, rather than letting spending drift upward automatically with income. An annual spending review, comparing this year's total spending to last year's, and asking whether the increases represent genuine quality of life improvements or just unconscious adaptation, is a simple practice that prevents the drift without requiring miserly frugality. Mistake number 4. Panic selling during market downturns. We covered the behavior gap in Chapter 4, the phenomenon by which investors earn less than the investments they hold because they buy high and sell low in response to market movements. Here, let's make it concrete with numbers. The S&P 500 has historically returned approximately 10% per year on average, but this average includes some catastrophic years: 2008's approximately 37% decline, 2020's brief but severe COVID crash, various other significant downturns. An investor who stayed invested through all of these captured the 10% average. An investor who panic sold at any of the major bottoms and waited for the recovery to feel safe before reinvesting crystallized the loss, missed the recovery, and ended up with dramatically lower returns than the buy and hold investor who never touched their portfolio. The specific calculation of a single panic sell and wait decision during a major downturn can cost years of returns. In the 2008 to 2009 market crash, the S&P 500 bottomed in March 2009. An investor who sold at the bottom and didn't reinvest until the market had recovered its losses, waiting until 2013 or so to feel safe, missed a roughly 150% gain from the March 2009 bottom. That one emotional decision, made in one moment of fear, cost 4+ years of market growth. The protection is automation and commitment. Automate contributions so they continue regardless of market conditions. Commit in writing, literally, write it down, to not selling during market downturns before the downturns happen, when you're calm and rational rather than frightened. Make the decision in advance when fear isn't present, and hold yourself to it when fear arrives. Mistake number 5, waiting for the right time to start. The most expensive mistake in wealth building is not a bad investment or a poor financial decision, it's delay. Every year of not investing is a year of compound growth that can never be recovered. The mathematics of starting early versus starting late are among the most striking in personal finance. An investor who starts at age 25, invests $500 per month, and stops completely at age 35, 10 years of investing, then nothing for 30 years, ends up with more money at 65 than an investor who starts at 35 and invests the same $500 per month all the way to 65. The early starter had 10 years of contributions, followed by 30 years of compounding. The late starter had 30 years of contributions, but missed the compounding on the early contributions. Time in the market beat 3 times more contributions. This example is not designed to make late starters feel hopeless. Starting at any age is dramatically better than not starting, but to illustrate viscerally why waiting for conditions to feel right, for income to be higher, for the market to look better, for life to be less complicated is one of the most costly financial behaviors available. The right time to start is always the present moment, not the ideal present moment, just the present moment, with whatever income is available, with whatever knowledge you currently have, with whatever amount you can spare. The perfect plan executed later is worth less than the imperfect plan executed now because the imperfect plan now has more time to compound. Mistake number 6, concentrating wealth in a single asset. Diversification is one of the most thoroughly validated principles in investment theory, and yet people building wealth from nothing frequently make the mistake of concentrating their wealth in a single asset, most commonly their employer's stock, their own home, or a single business. The employer stock concentration happens when employees participate in stock purchase plans, receive equity compensation, or simply accumulate employer stock in their 401k without rebalancing. A single company's stock, regardless of how much you believe in it, carries risks that a diversified portfolio doesn't. The company can fail, underperform, or face industry disruption that devastates the stock price regardless of the broader market. The catastrophic examples: Enron employees who had most of their retirement savings in company stock, employees of companies that collapsed in the 2008 financial crisis, are extreme but illustrative. Home concentration is the other common form. For many middle-class Americans, their primary home represents 50% to 80% of their total net worth. This is concentration in a single illiquid, geographically specific, high-maintenance asset, a risk profile that would be considered reckless in any other investment context. The corrective is not to avoid homeownership, but to build financial assets alongside home equity so that the home represents a smaller and smaller proportion of total net worth over time. Business concentration affects entrepreneurs and successful self-employed professionals who've built most of their wealth in their business. A business is worth something only when it's sold or generating extractable profit. Until then, it's illiquid concentration with substantial operational and market risk. Building extractable financial assets alongside the business through consistent investment outside the business provides financial resilience that the business alone doesn't. Mistake number 7, neglecting insurance as a wealth protection tool. Insurance is the least exciting topic in personal finance and the one most likely to be underinvested in by people who are focused on building rather than protecting. This is backwards. The purpose of building wealth is to achieve financial security, and financial security that can be devastated by a single uninsured catastrophic event is fragile in ways that undermine the entire project. The insurance gaps that most frequently destroy years of wealth. Building, disability insurance protects your income, your ability to generate the wealth, and is the most underutilized important insurance type. Term life insurance protects your dependents' financial future if your income-generating capacity is removed permanently. Umbrella liability insurance protects accumulated assets from lawsuits and claims that exceed the limits of standard home and auto policies. Health insurance obviously protects against medical costs that in the US can be catastrophic without coverage. The framework insure against risks that would be financially catastrophic, that would destroy or severely set back the wealth-building project. Don't overinsure against risks that would be uncomfortable but recoverable. A $1,000 deductible on a car insurance policy is fine. You can absorb $1,000 without catastrophe. A significant gap in disability coverage is not fine. Being unable to work for a year without disability income could wipe out years of accumulated savings and create debt on top of it. Chapter 8. The Long Game. What rich from nothing actually looks like. Over time, we've covered a lot of ground. Income building, savings rates, investing frameworks, psychological obstacles, advanced moves, common mistakes. It's time to bring it together into a coherent picture of what the journey actually looks like. The realistic arc from nothing to genuine financial independence, with honest timelines and honest milestones and honest description of what each stage feels like. Because here's the thing about building wealth from nothing that doesn't get said enough. Most of the journey is invisible. Not to the math is working the whole time, but to the emotional experience of the person living it. For years, sometimes many years, the progress feels slow, the numbers feel small, and the goal feels distant. And then, at some point, something shifts. The math that was grinding quietly in the background starts, producing numbers that are impossible to ignore. The account statements stop looking like small sums with big goals attached to them and start looking like real, substantial, life-changing wealth in the making. The compound interest that was adding $38 per month is now adding $1,500 per month, then $3,000, then $5,000. This inflection point, the moment when the math starts working for you loudly instead of quietly, is the emotional payoff that the early years are working toward. It doesn't happen overnight, but it happens reliably for everyone who stays on the path long enough to reach it. The stages of the journey. Stage 1, the foundation years, is roughly the first 1 to 5 years of serious wealth building, starting from zero or negative net worth. This is the hardest stage psychologically because the progress is real but nearly invisible. You're building the emergency fund, you're eliminating high-interest debt, you're establishing automated savings habits. You're capturing the employer match. The portfolio is small, the compound growth is small. The gap between where you are and where you're going feels enormous. What keeps people on the path through this stage is not the math. The math is too small to be motivating yet. It's the clarity of the mission, the consistency of the habit, and the evidence that the behaviors are working even when the numbers aren't yet impressive. Every debt eliminated is real progress. Every month of automated savings is real progress. The foundation is being laid. Stage 2, the acceleration years, typically covers years 5 through 15 of consistent wealth building for most people. The portfolio has reached a size where compound growth is noticeable, where months of growth sometimes exceed months of contribution. The debt is gone. The savings habits are established and largely automatic. The income has grown through job switches and skill development in the early years of career progression. The gap between income and spending has widened. This stage feels qualitatively different from stage 1. The progress is visible month to month. The financial independence target, which seemed impossibly distant in year 1, is now something you can see the path to. You've had your first market downturn and survived it, maybe even bought more at lower prices. And you understand from experience, not just theory, that downturns are temporary and continuing is the right response. Stage 3, the compounding years, is the stage that most wealth builders who've stayed the course reach somewhere between year 15 and year 25, depending on their income, savings rate, and market conditions. The portfolio is large enough that compound growth does a significant portion of the heavy lifting. A 7% return on $500,000 is $35,000 per year, growing the portfolio by almost 3 times the contribution of someone saving $1,000 per month. A 7% return on $1 million is $70,000 per year, exceeding the annual contribution of almost any saver. In this stage, the relationship with financial anxiety fundamentally changes. The buffer isn't just an emergency fund anymore. It's a substantial portfolio that provides real resilience against almost any financial shock. Job loss, which was terrifying in stage 1, is now a significant inconvenience manageable from savings. Market downturns, which were emotionally painful in stage 1, are now intellectually interesting rather than frightening. A large portfolio dipping 20% and then recovering is a paper experience, not a crisis. Stage 4, financial independence, is the destination. The portfolio has reached 25 times annual expenses. The 4% withdrawal rate covers your cost of living. Work becomes optional, not something you necessarily stop, but something you do because you choose to, rather than because you must. The money works for you rather than you working for money. This stage looks different for different people. Some people reach it and keep working at careers they love, simply with the profound psychological shift of knowing they don't have to. Some take extended breaks, travel, pursue creative projects, care for family members, or simply live at a pace that was impossible when income generation was mandatory. Some build businesses they've always wanted to build, now able to take the risk because the downside is no longer catastrophic. What it consistently produces, across all the variations of how people actually live it, is freedom. Not freedom from responsibility or from engagement with the world, but freedom from the financial coercion that drives most people's major life decisions. The freedom to choose your work, your time, your priorities, your life structure without money being the primary constraint. That is what rich actually means, and it is achievable from nothing by ordinary people in ordinary careers over realistic timescales. With the strategies and mindset this video has described, the honest timeline. Let's be specific about what the timeline looks like for different income levels and savings rates, because vague timelines are easy to dismiss, and specific ones are motivating. Someone earning $50,000 per year with a 20% savings rate, $10,000 annually, starting from zero, financial independence, at $40,000 annual expenses, requiring $1 million, reached in approximately 32 to 35 years. Substantial wealth, $500,000, reached in approximately 22 to 25 years. Someone earning $75,000 per year with a 30% savings rate, $22,500 annually, starting from zero. Financial independence, at $52,500 annual expenses, requiring $1,312,500, reached in approximately 25 to 28 years. Substantial wealth reached in approximately 18 to 20 years. Someone earning $100,000 per year with a 40% savings rate, $40,000 annually, starting from zero. Financial independence at $60,000 annual expenses, requiring $1,500,000, reached in approximately 20 to 23 years. Substantial wealth reached in approximately 14 to 16 years. Someone earning $150,000 per year with a 50% savings rate, $75,000 annually, starting from zero. Financial independence at $75,000 annual expenses, requiring $1,875,000, reached in approximately 16 to 18 years. Substantial wealth reached in approximately 11 to 13 years. These are not guarantees. They're mathematically grounded estimates using historical average returns. Market performance varies, life intervenes, income trajectories change, but they're real and achievable, and for most people who've been told that financial independence requires either extraordinary income or extraordinary luck, seeing the math laid out clearly produces an important realization. This is actually possible for me. Not someday, maybe possible. Specifically, concretely, mathematically possible, if I make the right decisions and stay on the path. What nobody tells you. About arriving. Here's one final, honest observation about reaching financial independence, about building genuine wealth from nothing, that almost no one who talks about money ever says clearly, it doesn't fix everything. The financial anxiety that's been a constant background noise for most of your adult life doesn't vanish the day your portfolio hits the number. The relationship patterns and emotional responses and psychological tendencies that develop during years of financial struggle don't automatically upgrade when the balance sheet does. The identity questions, who am I without the financial pressure that's been defining my relationship with work and time and purpose, don't resolve automatically when the pressure lifts. Building wealth from nothing is not a cure for the human condition. It's a removal of one of the most significant and most unnecessary sources of suffering available in modern life, financial insecurity, and the replacement of it with genuine optionality about how you spend your time on earth. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, extraordinary. But the person who arrives at financial independence expecting it to feel like a permanent emotional destination, like contentment finally achieved, will be surprised to find that it feels more like a clearing. A space where the noise of financial coercion has been removed, and the actual questions of how to live a meaningful life become, for perhaps the first time, the central questions rather than the luxury questions. Those questions are worth having. They're better questions than the ones financial insecurity forces, but they're still questions, still work, still a life being navigated with incomplete maps. The difference is that you navigate them with genuine freedom rather than economic constraint. And that difference, for the people who've experienced both sides of it, is everything. Chapter 9, The Real Estate Question: When it accelerates wealth and when it destroys. Real estate is the topic that generates more confident, contradictory, and emotionally charged opinions in personal finance than almost any other. On one side, you have the real estate is the only real wealth camp, people who've built significant net worth through property and are convinced it's the superior vehicle for everyone. On the other side, you have the index fund purists who point to the math of stock market returns and argue that real estate is an inefficient, illiquid, management-intensive way to achieve outcomes that a Vanguard account handles more cleanly. Both camps have genuine evidence for their positions. Both camps also have significant blind spots. The honest answer, the one that actually serves you, is that real estate can be a powerful wealth accelerator under specific conditions and a wealth destroyer under others, and the difference between those two outcomes is almost entirely determined by how, where, and when you engage with it. This chapter is the real estate conversation done honestly, without the course-selling enthusiasm of the real estate investing community and without the dismissive superiority of the pure index fund crowd. The primary residence question. Before we talk about investment real estate, let's address the question that's more immediately relevant for most people. Should you buy a home to live in? And if so, when and how much? The cultural default answer is yes, always, as soon as possible. Homeownership is presented as an unambiguous milestone of financial adulthood, a smart investment, a wealth-building vehicle that renting can never replicate. This narrative is partly accurate and significantly overstated. Here's what's true. Owning a home builds equity through mortgage paydown, provides inflation protection as home values and rents tend to rise over time, offers stability and control over your living situation that renting doesn't, and can produce meaningful wealth. Appreciation in markets with strong long-term demand. For most middle-class Americans, home equity is the single largest component of net worth. The wealth-building contribution of homeownership is real. Here's what's overstated. The return on a primary residence, when calculated honestly to include all costs, is frequently more modest than the headline appreciation number suggests. Property taxes, insurance, maintenance, transaction costs on both ends. Buying and selling typically costs 8% to 10% of the home's value in total fees and commissions, and the opportunity cost of the down payment all reduce the effective return substantially. Robert Shiller, the Nobel Prize-winning economist who tracks long-term home prices, found that U.S. home prices have appreciated at roughly 0.4% per year in real terms, after inflation, over the past century. That's not a spectacular investment return. It's a reasonable store of value with meaningful lifestyle benefits, the equity build. From paying down the mortgage is real wealth accumulation, but it's your own money going in that's creating the equity, not investment returns. The honest framework for the buy versus rent decision: buying makes sense when you have a stable enough life situation to commit to a location for at least 5 to 7 years to recover transaction costs through appreciation and equity build, when the price-to-rent ratio in your market makes ownership competitive with renting on a monthly cost basis, when you have a down payment that doesn't leave you financially fragile afterward, and when the stability and control of ownership genuinely matter to your quality of life. Renting makes sense when you're in a high price-to-rent ratio market where the monthly cost of ownership substantially exceeds comparable rent, when your life situation is likely to change in ways that would require selling within a few years, or when the capital that would go into a down payment can generate higher returns deployed elsewhere. Neither option is universally correct. Both can be right depending on your specific market, life stage, and financial situation. Investment, real estate, the cases that actually work for investment real estate. Buying properties with the intention of generating rental income and appreciation. The relevant question is whether the specific investment meets a set of financial criteria that most would-be real estate investors never bother to calculate before buying. The primary metric for rental property analysis is the capitalization rate, or cap rate, the property's net operating income, rent minus all operating expenses including taxes, insurance, maintenance, and management but before debt service, divided by the purchase price. A cap rate of 6% means the property generates 6% of its purchase price in net operating income annually before financing. The problem with most residential real estate in hot markets Cap rates are terrible. In major coastal cities and desirable markets that get the most attention in real estate investing media, residential properties often have cap rates of 3% to 4% or even lower. A 3% cap rate means you're generating 3% of the purchase price in net operating income before debt service. At a mortgage rate of 6% to 7%, you're paying more in debt service than the property generates in operating income, meaning the property has negative cash flow. You're subsidizing it out of pocket every month and hoping that appreciation compensates. This can work, and in historically appreciating markets it sometimes has worked dramatically, but it's a speculation on appreciation, not an income investment, and speculations on appreciation have a failure mode. Markets that don't appreciate as expected, or that decline, that income investments don't. Real estate that works as a wealth-building vehicle tends to share specific characteristics. It's purchased in markets where the price-to-rent ratio supports positive cash flow after all expenses, including financing, meaning the rents cover the mortgage, taxes, insurance, maintenance, vacancy allowance, and management with some margin remaining. It's purchased below market value through distress, negotiation, or value-add opportunity that creates equity at acquisition rather than hoping for appreciation to create it over time. It's managed efficiently, either by a capable owner who enjoys the operational work or by a professional manager whose cost is already accounted for in the cash flow analysis. Real estate that destroys wealth tends to share different characteristics, purchased in overheated markets at cap rates that don't support positive cash flow, financed with too much leverage that leaves no room for vacancies or unexpected expenses, managed poorly, or with underestimated operating costs, and held in concentrated geographic positions that expose the investor to local economic or regulatory risks. The house hacking strategy. There's a specific real estate strategy worth naming explicitly because it represents the most accessible entry point for beginning investors and has a genuinely strong financial profile: house hacking. House hacking means buying a multi-unit property, a duplex, triplex, or fourplex, living in one unit and renting out the others. The rental income from the occupied units offsets the mortgage payment, potentially reducing your housing cost to near zero or even generating positive cash flow. You're building equity through mortgage paydown and potential appreciation while living in the property, using residential financing rates and down payment requirements rather than the higher rates and larger down payments typically required for pure investment properties. The financial profile of house hacking at its best: you're essentially living for free while building equity and getting hands-on property management experience that makes subsequent investments more competent. At its worst, in expensive markets where rents don't cover a meaningful portion of the mortgage, it's still typically cheaper than renting a comparable space, and you're building equity rather than paying a landlord. The lifestyle trade-off is real. You're a landlord to people who live on your property, which creates proximity to the operational realities of property management that doesn't exist when tenants are in a separate building. But for people who are comfortable with that arrangement and are in markets where the numbers work, house hacking is genuinely one of the fastest legitimate paths to reducing housing costs while building real assets. REITs. Real estate without the toilet calls. For people who want real estate exposure without owning and managing physical properties, real estate investment trusts, REITs, provide it within a standard brokerage account with full liquidity and professional management. REITs are publicly traded companies that own portfolios of real estate, commercial, residential, industrial, healthcare, data centers, and various specialty types, and are required by law to distribute at least 90% of their taxable income to shareholders as dividends. This structure produces higher dividend yields than most stocks and provides exposure to real estate returns without the concentration, illiquidity, and operational requirements of direct ownership. The return profile of REITs historically has been competitive with the broader stock market over long periods, roughly comparable to the S&P 500 with higher dividend yields and different volatility characteristics. REITs tend to be more sensitive to interest rates than the broader market. Rising rates make their financing more expensive and make their dividend yields less competitive relative to bonds, which tends to depress prices. For a wealth-building portfolio that wants real estate diversification without direct ownership, a REIT index fund VNQ from Vanguard or SCHH from Schwab are commonly used options, provides broad exposure to professionally managed real estate portfolios at minimal cost. This is a reasonable, accessible way to participate in real estate returns as part of a diversified portfolio without the complexity, capital requirements, and operational burden of direct property investment. The Real Estate versus Index Fund. Debate. A genuine answer. Here's the honest answer to the question that generates so much unproductive debate. Real estate and index fund investing are both legitimate wealth-building vehicles with different risk profiles, return drivers, operational requirements, and suitability for different investor types. Direct real estate investment, buying and managing rental properties, is appropriate for investors who have the capital for down payments without financial fragility, operate in markets with favorable price-to-rent ratios that support positive cash flow, are willing and capable of handling or overseeing property management, and have sufficient financial resilience to weather vacancies, maintenance surprises, and local market fluctuations. For these investors, the leverage available in real estate, combined with income generation and equity build, can produce excellent risk-adjusted returns. Index fund investing is appropriate for virtually everyone. It's the default recommendation because it requires minimal capital to start, produces historically strong returns, requires almost no ongoing management, is fully liquid, is broadly diversified, and has no operational requirements. It's the vehicle that works for people who don't want to think about their investments, and its simplicity is a feature rather than a limitation. The false dichotomy is choosing between them. The sophisticated approach, used by many people who've built significant wealth from nothing, is to build the index fund portfolio through tax-advantaged accounts while simultaneously evaluating real estate opportunities in markets where the numbers support positive cash flow investments. Not one or the other, both, where each makes sense, sized appropriately to financial capacity and risk tolerance. Chapter 10. The conversations nobody has about money and why they matter. Here's something that doesn't appear in most financial education content. Money is not just a mathematical topic, it's a relational one. How you talk about money, or don't talk about it, with the people closest to you has enormous implications for your ability to build wealth, and the specific conversations that most people avoid having, or have badly, are frequently the conversations most responsible for financial derailment. This chapter is about those conversations, the ones that are awkward, uncomfortable, culturally taboo, or just never prioritized. Because building wealth from nothing in isolation without addressing the relational dimensions of money is significantly harder than building it with aligned relationships and clear communication. The partner conversation. If you're in a committed relationship, married, partnered, living together, your wealth-building trajectory is inextricably linked to your partner's financial behavior, values, and goals. This seems obvious when stated directly. It's astonishing how rarely it's addressed directly. Financial incompatibility is one of the leading causes of relationship stress and relationship failure. Not because money itself causes conflict, but because money is the daily practical expression of values, priorities, and life vision. And when two people have significantly different values, priorities, and life visions, the financial manifestation of those differences creates constant friction. The specific conversations that matter. What does financial security mean to each of you, and at what level does it feel achieved? What are the non-negotiable lifestyle standards you each need in order to feel like your life is good? What does retirement mean to you? At what age, in what lifestyle, with what activities? How do you each feel about risk, in investments, in career choices, in business ventures? What is each person's money story? The inherited beliefs about money from family and culture that are driving behavior without necessarily being examined. These conversations are uncomfortable because they reveal real differences that require real negotiation, but the discomfort of having them is vastly smaller than the cost of not having them, of spending years in a financial partnership where one person is saving aggressively while the other is spending freely, where one person's risk tolerance is constantly in conflict with the other's, where the life vision being worked toward was never explicitly agreed on and may not be shared. The practical financial structures for couples also deserve explicit discussion. joint versus separate accounts, how large purchases are decided, how financial goals are set and tracked, what each person's individual spending autonomy looks like within the shared financial system. There is no universally correct answer to any of these structural questions. There is a correct answer for your specific relationship, and finding it requires having the conversation rather than defaulting to whatever pattern emerged without deliberate choice. The family money conversation. Beyond romantic partners. Family money dynamics create some of the most complex and least discussed financial complications in the wealth building journey. These include parental financial expectations or dependence, sibling dynamics around money, the question of financial support for family members who are struggling, and the inheritance question, both receiving and eventually passing on. The specific scenario that most frequently derails wealth building plans, becoming the family financial backstop, the person in a family who has achieved a degree of financial stability, or even just a stable income, often becomes the implicit resource for family members experiencing financial difficulties. Loans that become gifts, regular financial support that wasn't explicitly agreed to, but became expected. The social and emotional cost of saying no in family contexts is high, and the financial cost of always saying yes can be enormous. This isn't an argument for never helping family members. It's an argument for having explicit, honest conversations about what support is available, what form it takes, gift versus loan, one-time versus ongoing, and what limits exist. The people who can say clearly and kindly, "I can do this much and not more," are protecting both their own financial trajectory and their relationships, because implicit resentment about money given under social pressure does more relational damage than an honest conversation about limits ever would. The inheritance topic is worth addressing separately. If you're likely to receive a meaningful inheritance, building your financial plan around that expectation is a mistake. Inheritances are unpredictable in timing, amount, and actual receipt. Healthcare costs can consume what seem like significant wealth, family dynamics can redirect expected inheritances, and plans change. Build as if no inheritance is coming. Treat it as a bonus if it does. If you're building wealth with the intention of passing some of it to future generations, the estate planning conversations, wills, trusts, beneficiary designations, powers of attorney are part of the wealth building project and deserve the same deliberate attention as the accumulation strategies. Wealth built over decades can be significantly diminished by poor estate planning, and the people most likely to neglect this are the people in the middle of the accumulation phase who feel like estate planning is something to deal with later. Later, in this context, sometimes comes at inconvenient times. The friend group money conversation. Your friend group's financial norms exert more influence on your financial behavior than most people acknowledge. The spending level that feels normal in your social circle, the restaurants you go to together, the vacations you take, the housing situations you compare yourselves to, calibrates your sense of what's reasonable and expected in ways that operate largely below conscious awareness. When your financial goals require behavior that's notably different from your friend group's norms, saving aggressively while friends spend freely, driving a modest car when friends drive new ones, living in a smaller space when friends have upgraded, the social cost of that difference is real. Not from malice, just from the ordinary human dynamics of social comparison and the discomfort of being visibly different from the group. The conversation worth having, not necessarily with your entire friend group, but with the friends who matter most, is some version of, I'm working towards specific financial goals that are going to mean I make different choices than I might otherwise for the next few years. I want to stay connected and do things together, and I also need to be honest that I'm going to say no to some things for financial reasons, not because I don't want to spend time with you. This conversation is awkward once, and then liberating indefinitely. It replaces the recurring minor embarrassment of declining things, or the recurring financial damage of saying yes to things you can't afford, with a clear, honest framework that most genuine friends respect. The friends who don't respect it, who pressure you financially, who make your different choices feel like a judgment of theirs, who define the friendship around spending at a level that doesn't work for you, are providing information about the friendship that's worth having. The workplace money conversation. There are two workplace money conversations that most people avoid to their significant financial detriment. The first is the salary negotiation conversation we covered in Chapter 2. It's worth reinforcing here in the relational context. The reason most people don't negotiate isn't lack of information. It's fear of social awkwardness, of being seen as greedy, ungrateful, or difficult. This fear is calibrated for a social cost that rarely materializes. Politely negotiating your salary is normal professional behavior that managers expect and that rarely damages relationships. The financial cost of avoiding it, year after year, is enormous. The second workplace money conversation is the one you have with yourself about whether your current employment situation is actually serving your wealth-building goals. Are you being paid fairly for your skills and contributions? Is there a realistic path to the compensation level you need within your current organization? Or is the ceiling lower than your goals require? Are you developing the skills and experience that grow your market value? Or are you stuck in a comfortable role that's keeping your income flat? These are hard questions because they potentially require uncomfortable action, a difficult conversation, a job search, a career pivot, a skill investment. But they're the questions that separate people who actively manage their career as a wealth-building vehicle from people who passively accept whatever their employer provides. The financial advisor conversation. One final conversation worth having with a financial professional if and when you reach the point where professional guidance adds value. The caveat first. For most people in the early to middle stages of wealth building, establishing savings habits, maximizing tax-advantaged accounts, building a simple index fund portfolio, professional financial advice is not necessary and is often counterproductive if it comes with high fees or product selling incentives. The straightforward approach we've described in this video serves the majority of people well without professional intermediation. The point where professional guidance genuinely adds value, significant complexity, tax situations involving business income, equity compensation, real estate, inheritance, or multi-state complexity benefit from professional tax advice. Estate planning beyond simple beneficiary designations benefits from an estate attorney. Investment management for very large portfolios with significant tax optimization opportunities benefits from a fee-only fiduciary advisor whose compensation is not tied to products they sell you. The critical distinction: fee-only fiduciary advisors, who charge flat fees or hourly rates for advice rather than commissions on products, are genuinely working in your interest because their compensation doesn't depend on what they recommend. Commission-based advisors, who earn money when you purchase financial products, have conflicts of interest that may not be aligned with your optimal outcome. The fiduciary standard, the legal requirement to act in the client's best interest, applies to some, but not all financial professionals, and knowing which category your advisor falls into is not optional if you're paying for professional guidance. The wealth you build is yours. The decisions about it are yours. Professional guidance is a tool, a useful one in the right context, an expensive and potentially harmful one in the wrong context. Use it deliberately, with clear understanding of who you're working with and why. Conclusion. Let's bring it home. This video started with a promise. No BS. No Lamborghinis. No vision boards. No secret systems. No survivorship bias disguised as a repeatable formula. That promise has been kept. Everything we've covered is real, grounded in evidence, applicable to ordinary people at ordinary income levels, with ordinary starting points. Here's what we established. Rich, honestly defined, is not a lifestyle. It's a condition, having enough invested assets that your money generates the income you need to live without selling your time. It's financial independence. It's freedom. And the number that gets you there, 25 times your annual expenses, is larger than it sounds, but smaller than you probably feared, and achievable on timelines that most people would find genuinely surprising if they'd ever run the math. Income is the foundation, not the whole story. The highest paid people frequently have disappointing net worths, but the fuel without which nothing else runs. Growing your income through negotiation, strategic job switching, skill development, and thoughtful side income is the first lever to pull, and it's a lever with more range of motion than most people believe. The savings rate is the most important number in your financial life, more than investment returns, more than income, more than any specific financial strategy. The gap between what you earn and what you spend is where wealth is built, and widening that gap, especially at income inflection points before lifestyle adapts, is the primary mechanical driver of wealth accumulation. Investing is simpler than the industry wants you to believe. Low-cost index funds in tax-advantaged accounts, held for long periods without behavioral interference, beat the vast majority of sophisticated strategies deployed by professional investors with access to resources you'll never have. The edge available to ordinary investors is simplicity, low cost, and time. Use all three. The psychological layer is where most people actually fail, not because they lack knowledge, but because they lack the specific mindset tools to manage present bias, social comparison, money scripts, and the emotional turbulence of a long-term project in a world optimized for short-term gratification. Understanding the psychology, specifically, designing systems that work with the psychology rather than against it, is what separates people who execute from people who understand but don't. The advanced moves: gap maximization at income inflection points, tax optimization, employer benefits utilization, strategic debt management, multiple income streams built on existing expertise, are not secrets. They're things that people who build wealth from ordinary starting points almost universally do, and that most people who don't build wealth either don't know about or know about without implementing. The mistakes: income optimization without savings discipline, high interest debt alongside investing, unconscious lifestyle creep, panic selling, waiting to start, wealth concentration, insurance gaps, are predictable and avoidable. Knowing them in advance is most of the defense, and the journey, the long, boring, occasionally frustrating, consistently rewarding journey from nothing to genuine financial independence, is real. It takes time. It takes consistency. It takes the willingness to make decisions that feel uncomfortable in the short term because they're pointing at something important in the long term. It takes the capacity to think in decades while living in days. But it does not take luck. It does not take an extraordinary income. It does not take a startup exit or an inheritance or a fortunate timing of a real estate purchase or any of the exceptional circumstances that get most of the attention when people tell wealth-building stories. It takes starting and then continuing through the invisible years when the progress is real but not yet visible, through the market downturns that feel catastrophic and turn out to be temporary, through the social pressure to spend what you have on signals of success rather than building the actual thing, through the moving goalposts and the comparison traps and the psychological noise that the modern world generates in abundance. It takes all of those things, and none of them are beyond you. The math is on your side. Time is on your side. The system works reliably for people who work it. You now know how it works. Go build something.